Welcome, everyone. I'm Carly Reeson. I'm from Meg, and I'm joined by the lovely Lottie Dowling from Meg and Chantelle Kohn. Welcome.
Hi.
All right. So, just a brief overview of who's joining us today. So, Chantelle, you're an educator, facilitator, and change maker with over a decade of leadership development and training experience within the education, nonprofit, corporate, and government sectors within multiple countries. You're passionate about helping others develop the competencies needed to transform our communities and create a better society for everyone. And you're also the founder and director of the Change Collab. Welcome. We're also joined by Lottie Dowling, who's the manager of Going Global here at Meg Languages. And Lottie, you run student programs, educator professional development, and whole school transformation for global citizenship education. Now, I believe you've worked in education for over 25 years, and from what I know, you're quite passionate about the transformational power of education for everyone.
I think you've just given away how old I am, but yes.
You look amazing.
Welcome. Now, today we're going to go through a few questions, but it's going to be mostly a conversation. I'll get us kicked off first with Chantelle. This question, we want to know, what are some of the key skills that young people need to develop to become effective global citizens and leaders in today's interconnected world?
Well, firstly, thanks so much for having me. And that little intro sounds really intense. So I think for our young people today, there's a range of skills that I think as humans we've always needed. It's become much more prevalent, how critical the need is given how interconnected our world is now. But I think some of the key skills can really be broken down into kind of three key areas of understanding themselves, being able to understand others, and then also being able to understand the world and the various systems at play. And so then when you break those kind of umbrella skills down, we're looking at things like being able to be critically reflective of their own identity, what their particular perceptions are, what's shaped their perceptions, and then having more of a curiosity lens rather than a judgment lens, so that they're curious about who they are and why they show up the way they do, but they also apply that curiosity to the people they interact with and engage with. And then having that empathy of really wanting to understand and validate other people's experiences, so that then they have that agency to work with people to try and make things better. And so that systems piece is really around your critical thinking skills, your media literacy skills, to be able to really understand why is the world locally and globally the way it is right now, kind of what's led to all those things, so that then they're able to have that capacity and the willingness to want to change things and make it better for everyone. So there's a whole range of skills. You could call them human skills, they're 21st century skills. But for me, I think it's helpful to think of it in terms of the skills to understand yourself, to be able to relate to and engage and respect others, and then also the skills to understand and change the world.
That's really beautifully put. Thank you.
Thanks.
Lottie, did you have anything to add to that?
Just a yes and everything Chantelle said, absolutely. I think one of the other things that is a really kind of driving factor at the moment is the fact that our world is transforming so rapidly, and it's 4 times faster than the Industrial Revolution. And open the door and walks AI, and that pace is going to probably get faster. Things are going to change faster. So as well as all of those skills, I think that ability to learn and unlearn and relearn and teach ourselves and be a self-directed learner is going to be really key for our young people, and even our educators in schools and our leaders in schools and in society as well at the moment. That's such a big part of it. And then of course, to have that, you need the flexibility, you need to have leadership, you need to have resilience. And then, empathy and respect is always going to be that benchmark for being a good human in a world that's full of challenges.
Absolutely. Empathy is quite a big tool that we can utilize across both the local and the global interconnectedness. Now, Chantelle, how would you guide aspiring educators to integrate global citizenship principles and student agency into their teaching practices?
I think one of the things Lottie just said is really critical when we're wanting to help young people become global citizens who want to transform the world, is that we also need to do the work with educators as well. And so one of the ways that I help guide schools through that is intentionally working with all of the staff within a school and making sure they actually have the opportunity to deepen their own global citizenship. We talk a lot about, we want young people to be adaptable, flexible. We want them to come up with solutions to problems that they're inheriting. But we also need the adults in their lives to be able to really model those skills as well. And for a lot of us adults, when I was at school, I didn't get time to learn about, my identity. You might learn about some social issues in particular subjects, but it wasn't necessarily something that I think our generation as adults, we've had the opportunity to actually practice and strengthen our global citizenship. So I think that's one key thing, because like any skill, it takes time. You've got to learn it, practice it. You have to unlearn things as well, as Lottie said. So I think, being really intentional about having time and space and opportunity for staff to develop that so that then they can role model it. That also then helps lead to that whole school holistic approach as well. So it can sound really daunting to people of like, this is too much, or it's a whole other add-on. But I think as you guide people through understanding what global citizenship education is, people start to understand that it's actually it's a way of being and it's a way of teaching. You don't have to change what you're doing, but it's about having that space to look at your curriculum and ask like what perspectives are actually being delivered. Are we kind of presenting one particular group as the default norm, and we might be celebrating other groups, but we're still celebrating in a way that kind of positions them as different. So giving that space for that, like reviewing your resources, do the resources you use in your classroom, your digital library, your textbooks, if anyone still has physical textbooks, but do they look like the world today? Like our young people are so connected, more so than we've ever been. So they're getting access to different experiences, different stories, narratives. So do our resources reflect that? Are we teaching about all different people, both the celebrations and the triumphs, but also the struggles as well? So I think, if you think about it from that holistic perspective of teachers need the support, look at your curriculum, your resources, and then also engage your students when you're creating that whole school approach. Like have some focus groups with them, give them a survey, whatever works for your students, but actually just ask them, like, where do you think we're already doing really well at helping you become a global citizen, someone who is able to and willing to engage positively with others, respond to challenges in a positive way, and then also give them the permission to tell you, where could you do better? And then work with them to do that. But yeah, I think, seeing it as it's a whole school culture, it's the way we lead, it's the way we teach, it's the way we learn, it's the way we interact. So it actually is big. It informs like your school policies. Are they reflective of this idea of being global citizens? Your curriculum, your resources, your pedagogy, there's all these pieces, but you don't have to start totally again because people are already doing great work. It's more just about making it explicit.
I love the fact that you brought up the curriculum, Chantelle, because one of the big misconceptions that's out there about global citizenship education is that it's sort of its own subject, and it's absolutely a lens, it's a perspective, it's a way of being, and it's already there in the curriculum. If you look at the curriculum, it's all there. So it's just about strengthening, and then, as you said, looking at those resources and thinking about, how can we strengthen this work. And I think the other thing that is right there in front of us is, of course, our students and our parents and our community, the amazing kind of resources and ideas and perspectives that they have that they want to share. And we know from the last census that, some incredible data about, migration to Australia. 1 in almost half of Australians have a parent born abroad. Over a quarter of Australians were born abroad themselves. So imagine all of those amazing perspectives and global perspectives that is just sort of sitting right there in your community, in your school, in your town, in your city, that we can sort of be tapping into. I think also too, the SDGs is probably worth mentioning as well, because it's just such a huge movement around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Is a big sort of supporting piece towards global citizenship education. And I guess the last thing too really is just, Carla, you mentioned global citizenship education and student agency. And I think when I was at school and when I started teaching, I understood global citizenship education to be about learning about the world. And the action piece was very much missing. And I think that is probably reflective of education of my era. But of course, taking action for sustainable development and social justice is a key part of global citizenship education or global competence. But also student agency to do that is not just about global citizenship education, right, Chantelle? It's kind of there in everything else that we do. And there is very much its own kind of idea and pedagogy in itself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the really cool things that you start to see compared to when we were all at school is how much the role of the teacher has moved more into the role of the facilitator. And that can be really daunting for educators, and it definitely takes a long time to get used to. But when you move more into that facilitator role, you create that space for student agency to actually be something that you're intentionally building. You create space to tap into the wonderful resources and narratives and experiences that already exist within your classroom, but also, as you said, Lottie, with their caregivers, wider community as well. And so it's great to see that the way teaching and learning is happening is much more from that lens of let's co-design this. Let's make sure that students are having that voice and choice in terms of the particular areas they're wanting to focus on, but giving them that explicit opportunity to take action, because that was definitely missing for me as well. So it's exciting. I think we have a long way to go. Change of any type, always takes time. But it is great to see, that there's more of that teacher as facilitator and really creating that space for students to be the problem solvers and, to bring that critical lens to their learning, which is awesome.
Yeah, and maybe it's not necessarily, things weren't available then and are now. It's sort of the change of the times. We're more interconnected. Every person has this tiny little computer in their pocket, so we can make action a lot quicker than maybe we once were able to. Lottie, this next question towards you. Like I said, we're very interconnected. So what role do you see technology playing in facilitating this cross-cultural interactions, or how do we enhance global education initiatives using this?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, we need to understand technology. And I think there's, a lot of misunderstandings out there about, particularly around social media. So really understanding the work of something like the Humane Technology Education's work, which really helps us, think about students as content creators and as purposeful content creators, as that first sort of step. But absolutely, we live in this interconnected world where right now we're Zooming from different locations, and global collaboration is a very powerful tool. And global collaboration can be short term, so it can sort of just be these one-off experiences that you can have, and there's this number of programs that are available out there to kind of connect with a school online and learn about them. For the next hour, Microsoft had a great program for a while. I'm not sure if it's still going. Or you can use tools like Flip. Flip. Yeah. Microsoft now owns Flipgrid. At Meg, I set up something called the Global High Five, where we've got kids in different parts of the world giving 5 clues about where they are, and you get to guess where that young person is living from their 5 clues and looking at their background. And so, there's synchronous and asynchronous technologies. But of course, you also have long-term global collaboration partnerships as well. And they're sort of, more of a commitment to be setting up, but there's some wonderful work being done in that space, over time, particularly with languages education, but it doesn't have to just be languages education. And of course, virtual reality, we're moving into this world, here at MEG, we've already got, worlds being built out with the Great Wall of China and Machu Picchu, where young people are going to be in these spaces interacting with people from other cultures and learning about potentially a third culture, and using their language skills as well. So virtual reality is, that next step into another world of technology, but there's all kinds of technology and it can be used in all sorts of ways. What are some of the great ways you've seen, Chantelle, in your work?
I think one of the most amazing things about, just the increase and advancements in technology is that as long as people have access to it, it's actually made global citizenship, particularly the aspect of learning more about other people, it's made it so much more accessible because, back when I was at school, that opportunity, if we're thinking of the global part of like people from other parts of the world, it was very much like you would do an exchange, or, it was confined to particular subject areas. And so there was a lot of accessibility issues, like if you couldn't afford to travel, if your school didn't offer any of those things. Whereas I think one of the most amazing things with the advancement of technology is that it's made it so much more accessible for people to have those short-term and long-term collaborations, to be able to connect at probably more of an everyday level as well, and just gain like more of a general insight into people's lives, which is really cool. Some of the other ways that I've seen it is, what's been really interesting is people also realizing with global citizenship, the word global tends to throw us because we automatically think it's over there. Whereas, it's awesome to see people starting to recognize it's the local, it's the everyday as well. So using technology to connect like a rural school in Queensland with a metro school in Queensland, because their experiences are going to be really different as well, based on the jobs that their families are having, their commute to school, all of those things, but then they'll also get to see all of these incredible similarities they have. So I think it's great as a tool just to deepen our understanding and curiosity of other people, whether it's based on different nationalities, ethnicities, or it's based on, fellow Australians who live in different parts of Australia. But I love, when schools bring it into the curriculum as well and, turn it into these collaborative projects. So I've seen ones, doing business studies and collaborating with a school in another country or another city and having to use design thinking to actually come up with a product for this other area, and then really using their communication skills to better understand what is life like for you? What is it that you want? What is it that you need? And then being able to go through that pitch process with real people who are in a different situation and context, which is really cool. And I think it definitely makes learning feel much more relevant and real for our young people today, because they do all have access to the world with their little phones. So I think the more that we can tap into that with our kind of more traditional mainstream curriculum and teaching, the more it's going to feel really relevant when our young people are getting information from all parts of the world through TikToks and Instagram. I think, like you said, Lottie, we need to understand those things and how they can be used as a really powerful engagement tool and a really powerful tool for student agency. Obviously, there's parameters, and I think it's something we need to be taught of how to use technology effectively and appropriately, rather than it's something to be feared. I'm curious to see where things go, particularly with the AI side, and how can we make sure our young people can really bring the human element to technology, to ensure that we do create those positive changes.
Yeah, using it as an aid to really assist that process rather than replacing it.
I have a background that shows it. So we were talking about like connecting to the world, and I was like, when I work with schools, I talk about the onion, and it's really easy to start here, right? We start with our home and our school, but how do we reach out here? And technology is the way that, in the olden days, it was like, write a letter. But now it's technology, and it's technology within seconds. So it's how do we use technology and how do we bring that Chantelle's just said.
And it can be daunting, like you said, Chantelle, like having to use technology in the classroom if you were of a generation that grew up without it. That can be so vulnerable, and you have kids sitting around you with amazing digital literacy. But taking that jump and allowing them to lead that can be really helpful, because let's be honest, they're going to know so much more about that program that you're using. But it's really empowering to them if they can be like, excuse me, miss, yeah, actually you do this. And then you work on it together. You learn from each other. This sort of leads into my next question, which would be, what advice would either of you, Chantelle, we'll start with you, give to educators who wish to infuse global perspectives into their classroom but might be uncertain about where to begin?
It's a great question. I think it's really important to acknowledge and validate the uncertainty, because it's completely normal, it's natural, and I think, it's important to recognize that there is that uncertainty, and it could be a range of reasons. It could be because they're unsure of the technology side. It could be it's their own understanding of global citizenship. So one thing that I always encourage educators to do is actually start with themselves. So actually use some of the great survey tools that already exist. So you could use the PISA one and adapt it. There's one for globally competent educators. I forget who it's by, but if you Google it, because technology always helps us. But there's really great surveys and reflection tools out there that just give you a good sense of your own level of global citizenship, because it is something we're always building, because we're always learning more about ourselves, others in the world. But I think building that self-awareness is really critical, and bringing the lens of, well, how does that then actually influence and shape how I show up as an educator? My expectations about, what learning does or doesn't look like, what engagement does or doesn't look like. Because I think if we don't have that awareness, what tends to then happen is that global citizenship does become this add-on, where, I did that one unit, or there was that one assignment where they got to talk to some students in another country, rather than it becoming a way that it's a lens, it's how we interact, it's how we show up. Like, being a global citizen is you as a person. So I think, do that critical self-reflection and build the self-awareness, which is never ending, which makes it oh so fun. But then, I really recommend, while we want that holistic whole school transformation, that takes a really long time. And that's kind of the long-term goal. So start small. So think about, what's within your sphere of influence. Is it that you're going to focus on, you're wanting to bring some more reflective questions into your teaching because you want to create more space for student voice? Is it that you're going to bring in some more, content that reflects what's happening in the local and global world, and just create space in your classroom to start to have conversations about that, to practice talking about what's actually happening in our daily lives. So start small, celebrate the wins along the way. It's a long journey. But then also, you can think about everything from, if you are a school leader, you could look at, what are our policies right now? What's our mission statement? What's our strategic plan, our improvement agenda? Do all of those things reflect this idea of people being able to examine issues, understand perspectives, be able to collaborate and really take action for everybody's well-being and sustainability? Or if you're a classroom teacher, you could do the same thing, but you're looking at your units. Am I showing different perspectives? Am I actually making sure that we're learning about a range of different people? And again, always go back to your community. Ask them what's working, what's not. But definitely, I think that self-awareness piece, and then start small, but keep the eye on that long-term goal of where you see it become the norm. It's just normal for people to be curious, to be adaptable, to be wanting to understand others and create spaces where everybody really is supported, and the world is much better for everyone. Big goal.
There's so many ways into this work. That's what I always think. And I think for every school and every educator, it will look so different, and it should look different, And if you are new, it's really important that you gain confidence and you start with what makes sense and what's in front of you. Maybe that's resources, maybe that's books that you're using, maybe that's the digital technologies, maybe it's a club, and that's where you start to gain confidence with this work. Maybe it's the curriculum and sitting down with your team and saying, we're going to start with one unit and, how are we going to strengthen the global perspectives? Maybe it's Project Zero, Harvard, University's thinking routines. I've got global thinking routines, and you start to build some of those into the existing units that you've got, and immediately you've got that global lens just through using one resource. So we will actually link everything Chantelle and I've mentioned. I should probably add in the bottom of the interview on YouTube. But I think, just start with what you've got and build out. And, as Chantelle said, do a bit of research and find out more about what global citizenship is, because I think there is a lot of sort of misunderstandings about it. And build a professional learning network if you can of educators interested in this one, either in your school or find other educators on social media. There are sort of Facebook groups. I know Twitter's pretty much dead, but there are educators on Twitter.
There was a great educator group there.
I'm sure there are on TikTok. I think just reaching out and connecting and finding other people interested in this work. And there are a lot of programs around as well. So finding those programs. Chantelle, I know you've done a lot of work with the Department of Education Queensland, and Meg, we've done a lot of work with the Department of Education Victoria with funded programs, right?
I'm so glad you mentioned Harvard's visible thinking routines, because I think they're a brilliant resource for all educators, because they work with all curriculum areas. You can adapt them to all year levels. So, if you're working in early childhood up to year 12, they're just fantastic. And they're an easy in terms of bringing in that global perspective, opening up space for students to reflect and share. So I'm so glad you mentioned those. I think just remember that there is no one size fits all. And so look at what you're already doing, and then, where are some of the gaps, and then use your friend Google, see, is there a program that we could bring in to help with professional development or to help with a particular curriculum area? Meg does amazing stuff around languages. Like, is there something that you want to tap into there? There's so many great providers out there. So, don't reinvent the wheel. Teachers already have too much to do. So I think
teachers are busy.
Yes, so busy. But just, do a little bit of a reflection on what are we already doing, and celebrate that, because everyone's already doing this work in some way. And then work out, what makes sense as our next lift. And then find out, well, where do we go to get that support? Because you don't have to do it alone. Hopefully the Queensland Department of Ed will have their framework released and published soon. Things take time, but that will also be a really great resource for schools to think about, where are we in terms of this whole school approach, and then where can we go to try and continue to grow. But I think mainly just reach out. There's so many great companies doing work in this space to support schools, because we know that you're already swamped. So tap into it.
In between.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, both of you, for joining today. It's been an absolute fountain of knowledge, which has been great to tap into. So thank you. I think the big takeaway from someone who doesn't necessarily sit in this field all the time is just take one step at a time, check your self-awareness, see what you're interested in, go from there, and again, be the facilitator, talk to the students. They're who's going to lead the future and our global competency and all of that kind of stuff. So becoming global citizens one step at a time.
Oh, I like that. It's a great tagline.
I'll credit that to a student. It was all them.
This is why I ask the students. They have the gems.
Exactly. Well, we might leave it there. Thank you so much again. And to all of those listening, thank you for tuning in, and hopefully you've gotten something great from it. Again, all the links are below. So if you'd like to find out any of that, just click on those.
Thanks, Ali.
Thanks.